Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Kelly Green Hour first off-season episode here in 2026. Happy New Year to everybody. I know I said it already because we did have a game after the New Year, but I'll say it again. As we are 8 days away from Super Bowl 60 featuring the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. I'm your host, LG Harrell, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, what's going on, man?
Hey, life's good. I mean, Super Bowl is coming. I wish it was the Eagles in the Super Bowl, but unfortunately, we're not there. But life's good, and we have lots to talk about tonight.
We just have an offensive coordinator to talk about. I don't know. We'll see if people are happy. Before we jump into that, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHerrell54. And follow the Eagles Pin Pull Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're joining us live, let us know your thoughts in the chat about Sean Mannion, the new offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, Connor, before we jump into into Sean Mannion, the Eagles had they casted a wide net, which I'm glad they did because last year they didn't interview anybody at all. Just gave the job to Kevin Patullo, and we saw how that turned out. They had interest in Charlie Weiss Jr., who decided to stay at LSU. They had interest in Jim Bob Cooter. They had interest in Brian Dable, who they did interview. He ended up going to Tennessee to be the offensive coordinator for the Titans. They had interest in Mike McDaniel, who had a virtual interview, didn't come for an in-person interview, but he's more of a hot weather climate guy. He's been in San Francisco, Miami, now LA. He pulled out of the Ravens job, so I don't think he was ever going to want to coach in a cold city. They interviewed Bobby Slowick. They had interest in Declan Doyle, who said, I want to stay in Chicago, and then ended up becoming the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, so he obviously didn't want to be here. They requested an interview with Clayton Adams, the Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator, but Dallas blocked that request after Dallas hired Eagles secondary coach Christian Parker to be their new defensive coordinator. So that's a big loss for the Eagles. Christian Parker was highly respected in the organization and was potentially thought of as maybe being the heir apparent to Vic Fangio, but that's obviously not going to happen now. And they also had interest in Davis Webb, who's been on a couple of teams' radars. Kevin Stefanski ended up becoming the head coach of the Falcons. Just trying to quickly go through some of these. They did interview Zach Robinson. He ended up becoming the Buccaneers offensive coordinator. They apparently had interest in Arthur Smith, and I think he's going to be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. I think they had interest in Mike Kafka, and he ended up going to Detroit on their coaching staff. They also interviewed Josh Grizzard, and while he didn't get the job, he ended up signing as being hired as the passing game coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think that's potentially that was Kevin Patullo's position before he became the offensive coordinator of the Eagles. We'll see if Patullo decides to come back. I don't think he will, but you never know. They interviewed Matt Nagy, who was here. He played quarter. He went to the University of Delaware, which is close by. I think he was on the Eagles in preseason back in the day. Coached here under Andy Reid, and then became the Bears coach, offensive coordinator in Kansas City and whatnot. So the Eagles had interest in him. They talked to Dolphins offensive coordinator Frank Smith. They were planning to meet with Texans quarterback coach Gerard Johnson. I'm trying to quickly go in. I think, is that all the names? I don't know. There's a lot of names.
You're pretty close. You got a lot of them.
So before we again jump into Sean Mannion, what are your thoughts on the search that the Eagles went through, and the approach in which they went about it, to try to get the right guy to lead this offense and try to get Jalen Hurts and the offense back on track?
I mean, I always felt the longer the search went on, the more distant it was from Nick Sirianni and more towards Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie. So I do think that ultimately this was probably the best direction that it took. And I feel like Nick Sirianni was less involved than some people may think he was. But I'm glad they cast a wide net. There was so much that ultimately went into people's opinions about who got picked, who didn't get picked, and vice versa. But you kind of touched on, Mike McDaniel probably was never coming here. Brian Daboll, I mean, he had the connection. I get the connection that there was with Jalen Hurts. But was that ultimately going to lead to anything? It was tough to say.
So when it comes,
when it
comes to Daboll, sorry to cut you off, Connor. I mean, I'm not surprised he went to Tennessee because that's a defensive coach. So just like Fangio's the head coach of the defense here, Brian Daboll's going to be the head coach of the offense there. And you have a second-year quarterback and not a sixth-year quarterback who's already a Super Bowl MVP, and while they do have that connection from Alabama, you're not going to be able to really mold Jalen Hurts. You can mold Cam Ward into what you want him to be. And look, and Daboll, and there was reports that Daboll said that he was intrigued by working with Jalen again, but I just think that you have more leeway in Tennessee because Robert Saleh, you would think, isn't going to get fired after 1 year, and he's going to have a couple of years like
for sure.
There's a potential that Nick Sirianni gets fired after this year, depending on how the season goes. And, it's going to be an entire new staff here, and Daboll may not be there. So I'm not surprised that's the thinking of Daboll.
Yeah, I mean, I fully get the logic behind Brian Daboll, and Brian Daboll strikes me as the type that could withstand the Philadelphia media and the Philadelphia fan base, but to the same point doesn't want to face it. He could take it, but he probably doesn't. So I totally understand why he ultimately didn't end up in Philadelphia. And we're going to get into Sean Mannion and stuff. But I mean, it was at the end of the day, I feel like it was a tough circumstance to be in because there are people who sat there and said you could be walking into a job where, like you said, Nick Sirianni might not be back next year, but maybe that means something for Sean Mannion next year, and maybe the Philadelphia Eagles are thinking about next year or years beyond this year. But I mean, while we didn't necessarily get what the fan base felt was the guy to get, Mike McDaniel, Brian Daboll, some of those big guys, I don't necessarily believe where the fan base and media stance on it is necessarily indicative of where the Philadelphia Eagles are headed or where they could be headed. I feel like there's a lot of people like, I mean, ESP literally went from this side to this side to this side to this side. So there's a lot of the Philadelphia fan base or Philadelphia media base who's going in multiple different directions just to get an opportunity to get some clicks. And then there's a lot of the Philadelphia, fan base in general that doesn't quite know what to think of Sean Mannion, but Sean Mannion is so highly regarded in Green Bay and is very highly regarded in a national media base versus the media base that we're looking at it from, which is the Philadelphia media base, which is not necessarily the best scope to take in the majority of circumstances. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how things go this year and going forward. But I feel like the Philadelphia Eagles definitely, Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman kind of thought had a forward-thinking approach to this hire, and I don't know how much Nick Sirianni actually had in this hire, if he had much into this hire.
I will say one thing: Jeffrey Lurie, over the course of his tenure owning the Eagles, I mean, he doesn't go for the obvious for the most part. I mean, Chip Kelly was the one, I guess the one time he went for the obvious, and we saw how that worked out. I mean, nobody heard of Andy Reid when they hired Andy Reid. Nobody wanted Doug Peterson when we hired Doug Peterson. We won a Super Bowl. Nobody, I mean, Nick Sirianni's only interviewed here, and we won a Super Bowl. So, like, they sort of kind of try to think outside of the box, I guess. And they don't allow the pressure of the fan base and the pressure of the media to kind of dictate where they are going to go. And you kind of got to give them credit that they kind of block all that noise. So yeah, now when it comes to Sean Mannion, as Kassan Kadu, thanks for joining us, says Sean is a big question mark. He has a high ceiling but a very low floor. And I think, like you were mentioning, they're trying to go away, I think, from the Sirianni type offense, because if you look at who Sean Mannion played under, like, he's 2 years from being in the NFL. He was on that Seattle team in that game that the Eagles lost in Seattle, the AJ Brown or the Jalen Hurts interception when they kind of went rogue and threw the ball deep down the sideline. He's played under. He's coached with LaFleur. He's played under McVay. And
McConnell.
So, like, he's got those type of, or he's got that thinking, I guess you could say, in his head when it comes to offense. Like, it's not going to be 48 hitch routes in a game. They're going to try to get the receivers in open space. And I think that because he played the position, he's going to, and I know he's young, and this is gonna be the first time calling plays, and he wasn't as accomplished of a quarterback as Jalen Hurts is, but because he has that experience of playing, he can say, Jalen, you're gonna do this, and I want you to do this because A, B, and C is going to happen. I've seen it happen. I've done it myself, and I think just by having that experience, maybe that'll get into Jalen Hurts. He'll be able to get into Jalen Hurts' head, and maybe he will become more receptive to throwing the ball over the middle, to playing under center. I think they're going to play under center a little bit more. And I think
for sure
that if he's able to just, drill it into the head of Jalen Hurts, because he has that experience of doing it before and seeing it, from the McVay side, from the McConnell side, from the LaFleur side, that hopefully Jalen is going to be open and receptive to, making those changes and incorporating those things into his game.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to be able to step in and speak to Jalen Hurts and have Jalen Hurts hear them out and do some things that may be different than what he's comfortable with and than what he is, aware of. And Sean Mannion feels like the type, you see there's a lot of talk about Nick Foles, and Nick Foles spoke about Sean Mannion and working with him, and he has like this photographic memory and stuff. That was one of the things that made, Charlie Weiss so intriguing, or one of the things that was so intriguing about Charlie Weiss in general was that he had this, this photographic memory and this situational awareness that was so different than from so many other people in the NFL. So, I mean, while I'm disappointed that they didn't get some of the guys, like I was big on Charlie Weiss. I was big on, I was interested with the connection with Brian Daboll and what might be able to be there. And then, of course, Mike McDaniel. Of course, everybody wanted Mike McDaniel. That you would be remiss to sit there and say that if your team was hiring an offensive coordinator that you weren't looking at Mike McDaniel. But at the end of the day, Sean Mannion to me is someone who speaks to quarterbacks, understands quarterbacks, and has that, that ability to connect with Jalen Hurts that Kevin Petula didn't have. And Brian Johnson, of course, most recently has already interviewed for the offensive coordinator role in Denver and stuff. So, but like he was way ahead. And one of the biggest things that I like to speak to in this offensive coordinator search is that, you know, Nick Sirianni hiring for somebody within his coaching staff versus finding someone outside of the coaching staff who is a first-time play caller, I don't necessarily believe are the same thing. There's a lot of people who believe there's this correlation between Nick Sirianni hiring within and the Philadelphia Eagles hiring outside, and that they're going to end up with the same success rate. And I don't necessarily believe that that's true. I don't necessarily believe that that's going to be true of Sean Mannion. Sean Mannion, I feel like we are taking advantage of an opportunity to get ahead of the curve when we usually were one of those ones. Like, we could have easily taken Matt Nagy and patch jobbed this and seen what might have happened. But instead we went with Sean Mannion and Josh Grizzard. Josh Grizzard and Sean Mannion are very different, have similar but different mindsets. But ultimately, to me, it feels like, you know, we could have easily patch jobbed this, but we didn't patch job this. We went with a different mindset. We went the forward thinking mindset, and I'm very happy with the way that we approached this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy they didn't kind of go with a retread in terms of like the Jim Bob Cooter or the Matt Nagy. Like you kind of, you know what you're going to get with them. We don't really know. And look, a lot of teams aren't going to really. How are you going to game plan for a Sean Mannion offense? Because he's never done it before. Look, you can say, okay, it's going to be similar to Green Bay's or similar to Minnesota's or something like that. But he's going to, you know, want to put his own touches into it. So that should make things intriguing. Like, I'm looking for. We're not going to see anything in preseason probably. Maybe now. You know what? We might actually see a little bit of something. Like, I think we'll see Jalen Hurts play in the first preseason game or second preseason game. He won't play in all three. But like there's that chance that could potentially happen because you can only get so much. And now obviously they're going to do some joint practices most likely, but you can only get so much, you know, in practice. So Brett Eclipse, thanks for joining us. He goes, it's not my first choice, but of the remaining candidates, I'm fine with the Mannion hire. Personally, I had two overarching priorities in the OC search: being play calling experience and the ability to bring structural change to the offense. Only guys who had both to me were Daboll and McDaniel. Wow, he's got a lot here. Once we lost the chance to get someone who offered both, I would prefer someone who can bring structural change over someone with play calling experience. And again, the offense that Mannion's coming from is way different than what Sirianni does. Now, will some of Sirianni's principles still be involved in offense? Yes. Like, obviously,
I wish not. I wish not, but we know
some
it's
principles.
true.
I'm not saying all of them. There's just some principles. You know, he does want to be a running. He is going to want to be able to run the football, and that's going to be dependent on the offensive line. But that'll also depend. Like, we know Devontae's going to be here. Is AJ going to be here? I hope he's here. I want AJ to be here. But we'll see how that goes. Be. Dallas Goedert, or what are they going to do at tight end? Goddard's a free agent. I would like to, if they can, I would like to draft Kenyon Sadiq, but the Eagles are drafting 23rd. He's going to be a top 15 guy picked. So they're, you know, would potentially have to be maneuvering there. So it's obviously going to depend on the weapons you have around, you know, Jalen, Saquon, and Devontae. Again, I hope AJ Brown is here. I want AJ Brown here. And I do personally think that I think it would have been easier with an offensive coordinator who was proven, but having an offensive coordinator that's not going to, you know, have him run nothing but hitches, you know, have him run a variety. Like when Kellen Moore was here, and again, the passing game wasn't great, but Devontae and AJ were running a bunch of different type of routes. They weren't running these same routes the entire game. Like there was that stat out there that the Eagles ran more hitches ran like 300 more hitches than the Green Bay offense. Now, I know that that's going to be a different correlation because LaFleur was calling plays and not Mannion, but still, it's going to potentially look different. And again, like I mentioned, the principles, some of the principles that Sirianni kind of his core values for the offense that he holds true, he's going to want in there, not turning the ball over. But I do think, I think one of the things that Sean Mannion's going to do with Jalen is don't be afraid to let it rip. Every quarterback turns the ball over. Like, if you don't give your receivers a chance, that's not how you're supposed to run offense. You don't want to just throw the ball out of bounds. And hopefully he cuts off the running to the right side of the field, like that the second down play in the playoff game, and then just throwing out of bounds. Because even Tanner McKee did that in the last regular season game. So I don't know if that was just what was being taught by Patullo. So like I'm intrigued by some of the things that could come about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who talk about, like, they look at the West Coast, the Shrine Bowl, and how we ran the offense, and ultimately at the end of the day, how they run it in like an all-star game for some of the more senior players in who are looking at going into the draft. It's a very different scope, but you can definitely tell that one of the things that I said, or that I tweeted out there for on our Kelly Green Hour, was like, Jalen Hurts would look really good looking play action bootleg and running a certain direction and throwing the ball a certain direction, and it looks like things could be very different. And I hope that they're very different for this offense. But I really like Sean Mannion. I really like, the concept of Sean Mannion and Josh Grizzard together. I think that the two of them can bring very, very different elements to this game, but at the same time, very positive elements and a step in the right direction for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, Brett Eclipse also says, and I kind of want to add to this, people also need to realize the talent on O isn't the same as before, especially with AJ and Dallas potentially leaving. To make up for the talent loss, they need schematic improvement, which Mannion can bring. And I agree with that. And like, if you think about it, it's going to change. All the money, or majority of the money right now, is on the offense. That's going to change. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, maybe Nakobe Dean, maybe Nolan Smith, maybe Jalen Phillips, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. They're all going to get paid. So it's going to go from an offensive-led team to a defensive-led team, and you're going to have to replace some of these high-priced guys on offense. So you're going to be drafting a bunch of young guys, and they're going to, and having somebody like Mannion, who, Jordan Love had probably one of his best seasons with him as the quarterback coach. Malik Willis, I think he was the QB coach, if I'm not mistaken. Malik Willis looked way better in Green Bay than he did in Tennessee. So, like, he has that, while he didn't call plays, he has that, he has that, where he can say, look, I've coached it up before. You look at Jordan Love, he wasn't he did throw off his back foot still a little bit, but he wasn't doing it as much. And he was, hitting his receivers in stride. Malik Willis couldn't read a defense or couldn't throw a football when he was at Tennessee, and he came here and he's going to get paid this offseason potentially. So, having that experience to be able to show, Jalen and show obviously whatever presentation he brought forth in his interview to the coaching staff, or excuse me, to Jeffrey and Howie, like that. That's something that Jalen should be able to hopefully be attracted to.
No, I agree. Like, the fact that like he was able to move Jordan Love to another level was really nice, but then the fact that he was able to take Malik Willis to a whole other level was just a absolutely different element to me, and I'm really interested to see what he can do. But I really think that you need someone who can connect with Jalen Hurts, and hopefully this isn't number 6 and then moving on to the 7th offensive coordinator, and this is an opportunity to continue to grow for Jalen Hurts and find some different elements to the game that he hasn't been able to find yet with some of the offensive coordinators. Kevin Patullo absolutely was not a good hire or promotion. Brian Johnson probably was ahead of his time. I mean, he's obviously getting, some interviews now, and this is 2 years down the road. He's starting to get some interviews, but it's unfortunate because, some of these guys might have opportunities and might be able to, move on in the NFL. But at this point, Kevin Patullo was more of a best friend to Nick Sirianni and just didn't work. And that it's unfortunate for Kevin Patullo. And I feel like Kevin Patullo and the way that fans reacted to him and the media reacted to him is probably why some people may have been more cognizant of the idea of, I don't know if I want to go to Philadelphia. I don't know if I'd be to the extent that, that some people think that, the egging of his house created this whole scheme or this idea that, no, you don't want to go in Philadelphia because they egged his house or whatever. But I feel like there is a different mindset to coming to Philadelphia. And the fact that somebody is willing, like Sean Mannion, to take that shot, to take that chance, to take that opportunity and know that, there's some risk going to this. I really feel like that's a good thing for someone willing to take that shot and to take that opportunity and come here and try, and hopefully they succeed, and hopefully there's a chance. There's people who said and spoke to, maybe why would anyone want to come here when Nick Sirianni might be, a coach who might be at the end of his tenure. This could be it, as much as we love him and respect him, and the fact that how good he has done from a statistical standpoint. This could be the end of his road, and people are like, and there's some people who sit there and they're like, whoa, maybe this is the end for him. So why would I want to come here when at the end of this season, I might not even have a job? But maybe there's a chance that Sean Mannion might be the one that gets the job at the end of all of this.
I mean, you can also think about the positives, where Shane Steichen and Kellen Moore got head coaching positions.
Exactly.
And I think that the hiring of Josh Grizzard. Now, actually, before I get to that, the big question becomes, say the offense goes to be a top 5 offense, Jalen in the MVP conversation, and like they're scoring 28, 29 points a game and not the 21, 22 points that they scored this year. And like Mannion's going to get head coaching interviews. Obviously it would depend on how the season ends, but like, would Jeff and Howie keep Mannion over Sirianni if the offense, like if Jalen is, or if like is bringing Josh Grizzard in kind of a safety blanket? Because if Mannion gets the offense going, he gets the head coaching job, then Grizzard is going to be working with Mannion, you would assume, as the passing game coordinator, on the offensive coaching staff this year. And then Grizzard can just move right into the offensive coordinator position. You know what I mean? Like, and again, it's going to suck because Jalen will have another ear in his, another voice in his ear. But like, this could be and again, this is where your coach, and again, I'm fine with Sirianni being a CEO coach, but this is where your head coach not being good at calling plays kind of bites you in the butt, because you're gonna have to replace the offensive coordinator every year if you're successful, because they're gonna get hired, or every year if they're not successful, because the offensive coordinator is gonna be scapegoated out, like Brian Johnson and Kevin Patullo were.
No, I agree. Like, at the end of the day, you have guys who have gone on to succeed in this role, and you have had guys who have gone on to not succeed in this role, like Kevin Patullo and Brian Johnson, who've had to go on and find other roles and try and find a different avenue to finding success in the NFL. So I agree with you. You could end up on either end of this, but to me, it feels like Sean Mannion, if he finds great success, but we don't win a Super Bowl, at least you find an avenue to get out from under Nick Sirianni, or an avenue to say, you know what, we want to move on with Sean Mannion because look what he did, but, the circumstance of the season ended a specific way that we didn't see with Brian Johnson, or that we didn't see with Nick or Kevin Patullo. but we can at least understand that moving on from Nick Sirianni makes sense. And it's going to be so difficult to understand at the end of the day if, has Nick Sirianni given up a lot of what he said he would give up, or if he didn't give up what he said he was going to give up. And I think that that's going to end up being how this offense looks. If this offense looks extremely different, it doesn't matter to me if Jalen Hurts plays in the first preseason game or any preseason game or not. To me, if this offense looks very different than what it did last season, I know that he gave up what he said he was going to give up.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the interesting part. Like, does Mannion, and even though he doesn't have the experience, does he have, full autonomy, which everybody says, like, that's what they were telling their offensive coordinator candidates, at least Dable and McDaniel. So that's going to be interesting, like, how that relationship works.
Which makes me wonder, LJ, do you think the Josh Grizzard hiring is a Sean Mannion move, or a Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie move, and it's all
interview
Howie these Roseman. Two guys,
it's all Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. Let's be honest.
So you think at least it's disconnected from Nick Sirianni, is what you're saying?
I mean, Sirianni was in the room, but he was in the corner of the room during these interviews. Let's be honest.
For sure. I agree. So let's get to some more of these comments. The Sirianni scheme has always been relying on talent alone. He even said in his opening presser, unless every unit is playing perfect, it doesn't work.
He also said, and remember, like 2 years ago, I think it was, they were asking him, like, how can you fix the offense? And he's like, if I had the answers, I would fix it. Or if I knew how to fix it, I would fix it. I can't believe a head coach who's an offensive guy said that. But yeah, like that's like, I'm surprised he didn't get fired after that comment, honestly.
And then Hurts Goat says, I hope they draft O-line and get Max Klein.
Well, they are definitely Max Clare. They're definitely going to draft O-line early, because who knows what's going on with Lane Johnson, and obviously Tyler Steen's not that good at right guard. So they need to get younger, obviously, but Johnson's going to be 37. And Steen's not good, and the injuries to Juergens and Dickerson. So they're definitely going to address O-line. That's not even going to be in that.
But to me, that's what makes me think like people are overreacting, and Jason Kelsey kind of spoke to it. Are people overreacting to the Landon Dickerson? Well, I mean, I sat there and said week in and week out that people were overreacting to Landon Dickerson and the injury. I think he should never have been out there week one, never should have been out there beyond by week 3 or week 4. If he had never touched a field, that was the proper approach to take, but he never took it. They never took it. I feel like that was the approach there. But the fact that Jason Kelsey spoke to that was massive to me. But we'll see where things go. I know we got a lot of comments on the offensive line. Adams Exploit says, hello, LJ and Connor, thermostat at 70 and wearing sweatpants and a hoodie here, LJ. Yeah, this is not me. I'm not wearing those sweatpants and hoodies, but LJ is.
I got a hoodie on, but I like that hoodies. When we got that snow last week, I was shoveling in shorts and a hoodie, so.
Hurts Goat says, I heard Phillips wants 25 and up mil. What are your thoughts?
Not happening here.
No, not happening.
They'll get a nice third or fourth round comp pick for that.
And I know that the big thing is with that is, the Philadelphia Eagles are sitting at between 15 and 18 million in cap space, and there's a lot of room to move, but to think that, if Jalen Phillips thinks he's worth $25 million a year, that's similar to the Josh Sweat. They're going to let him move on. It's unfortunate because I wanted Jalen Phillips back, but if he wants $25 million a year, it's just not going to happen. But it is in a move.
If you had to choose one, Jalen Phillips or Nakobe Dean, who would you keep?
Jalen Phillips. because I feel like, you know, they've positioned themselves in a way that they can move on from Nakobe Dean. They haven't positioned themselves in a way to move on from Jalen Phillips.
It's gonna suck seeing Nakobe Dean in a Dallas uniform next year. I hope you know that.
Don't say it. Don't say
Christian
it.
Parker's gonna bring Nakobe,
Man.
maybe Reed. Like, it's going to absolutely suck to see Nakobe. I don't care about Reed. I think he sucks. I don't think he's anything. Like, he's not a starting safety. We'll burn him. He can't cover anybody. But seeing Nakobe in Cowboys jersey is going to freaking suck.
I agree with you. Reed Blankenship, to me, like, at the end of the day, if you move on from him because he wants $8 million instead of $6 million, to me it makes perfect sense to move on from Reed Blankenship. But it is going to hurt to see Nakobe Dean in another. But there's a chance that Nakobe Dean moves on and gets in another jersey and ends up injured in some circumstance, because we know, we've been there, we've done that with Nakobe Dean. Brett Eclipse says Brian Johnson wasn't even that bad. He just lacked answers for the blitz at the end, and so did Sirianni. But that offense was still top 10 in almost all metrics.
Better than Patullo's offense.
Mannion could potentially stay if teams believe he's too early in his coaching career to become a head coach. Hard to see a team hire guy who's only been a coach at.
I don't know. I mean, and I get it. McVay was a coach for more than 3 years, I think, because he was at Washington, you know, before he got the Rams job. But if teams kind of want to get ahead of the curve, and they feel like if he gets this offense moving in the right direction, they'll take that chance. Maybe they'll give him some leeway. You want to have an offense. Most teams want to have an offensive coach, and depending on what your quarterback situation is, you know, depending on what the quarterback situation is, maybe he can work with them, and the organization will give, you know, Mannion some leeway to be able to, you know, kind of, if he were to go to get a head coaching position, get the offense going and get the team in the right direction.
Yeah, no. I agree with you. And here we got some more comments. Eagles need to fix the O-line in the draft. I feel like there's an overreaction
Caden Proctor. I want to draft Caden Proctor.
But I agree, but I feel like there's I feel like we need to start looking at the right tackle position. I feel like you need to accept that there's a reality that, you know, whether it's this year, whether it's this offseason, whether it's next season, it doesn't matter. Lane Johnson's moving on eventually. So you kind of have to make a decision on that. I know that we're going to get into this further down the road. But this prospect that the Eagles need to fix the O-line, and like there's this grotesque offensive line fix that needs to happen. I was saying this since well early in the season, and you can vouch for me, LJ, that I stood by that Landon Dickerson was not in the right position. I stood by that Cam Jurgens was not in the right position. I feel like they were both very much injured. I thought that it was insane that Landon Dickerson was coming back that first week of the season. Why force him back that first week of the season? It didn't make any sense. Cam Jurgens with the back injury, and then you brought it up, and I've thrown it out there on our Twitter. The prospect of Cam Jurgens moving to guard might make sense because at center but at the end of the day, at center, there's a lot more stress on your back. Does it make sense to have Cam Jurgens there? If Cam Jurgens isn't in the right frame of mind, in the right, you know, prospect from, you know, a physical standpoint, would it not make sense to move him to the right guard? Because at the end of the day, Tyler Steen is one of the easiest releases. Like, I think he's worth like a $1.25 million gain on the salary cap if they move on from Tyler Steen. Like, to me, if you can find a way to move on from Tyler Steen, makes perfect sense to me, especially Cam Jurgens. To me, the move on doesn't make sense this year, but it makes sense next season.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Like, the big question is, like, what were your thoughts of the report that came out that the run game coordinator kind of job got taken from Stoutland? And I think the big question comes, when did that happen? You know, was that when Sirianni said that he's going to be more involved? Is that when it got taken away? Was it earlier in the season? Because like that's kind of Like, obviously, nothing came out of Novacare with that happening. I I don't know if that had any impact on how obviously the health of the offensive line had an impact, but I don't know if that had any impact on how the running game, you know, play or how what running game fared throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say because at the end of the day, to me, I've always respected Jeff Stoutland as a offensive line coach. So the fact that things didn't work out in an offense that wasn't working out anyways, and they ended up moving him as the scapegoat mid-season versus, Kevin Patullo mid-season, I always felt and I believe that coming out of that Green Bay game, if you won that game significantly, it made sense to keep him in. It made sense to say, okay, let's give him another week. To me, it made no sense to give him Kevin Patullo any more leeway than that Green Bay game and the circumstance that came from that Green Bay game. But to me, at the end of the day, I'm perfectly fine with, he's an offensive line coach. He is better at pulling the most out of his offensive line than, maybe as a run coordinator.
Adams Exploit says, I don't think Jurgens would be good at guard. He's not powerful enough. He played guard for 2 years when we drafted him, and he was better than Steen was. I think he would make a better guard. And again, you have Willie Lampkin, Drew Kendall, Tyler Majors. Like, they have the kind of guys that could potentially fare a little bit better at the center position. Brett Eclipse says, injuries are fair excuse for bad O-line play, but why assume that's getting better? Dickerson had injury coming out of college, and Jurgens is recovering from a back injury, which can be tricky. I'm not assuming. I mean, obviously, they could just be done. The injuries could, but they're not playing. They didn't play into February this year. They get an extra month, and hopefully, like, instead of waiting, if surgeries are needed, instead of waiting until May, June, whatever to do it, maybe they get it done early so that they have a longer rehab process. I do expect Dickerson to be better. Like, I think Dickerson is going to be healthier coming into this season. Jurgens obviously is the bigger question. Like, I don't know how he made the Pro Bowl.
I agree.
He was not a Pro Bowler this year.
No. The fact that Jason Kelsey spoke to Landon Dickerson in a specific way, and now Cam Jurgens in a specific way, to me speaks volumes. The fact, like, he knows Landon Dickerson can improve, can be in a better situation, was not in a good situation, and we kind of spoke to it leading up to why force him into week 1 or week 2 when you could give him some more time to get into it. But Cam Jurgens to me is the biggest concern. But the good thing is, Dickerson and Jurgens both have very favorable outs at the end of this season that they can work with if one or the other or both do not work or fare the way that they expect them to.
Brett Cliff says, I've seen a theory that the move on from Stoutland as a run game coordinator might have to do with the Eagles wanting to run under center more, which Stout historically doesn't really do. And that they're going to do that, I think, more. At least I believe they're going to do that more with Mannion calling plays, because, I mean, Green Bay did that a lot.
For
sure. So you'd expect, and I do think that Jalen is going to be receptive and more open to, these changes. I mean, he's got one thing I do like, and a report came out, like, he wasn't involved in these meetings for offensive coordinator. And while you want your quarterback to be comfortable, I don't think he really should have. Like, they need to get away, obviously, go away from what they were doing, not running the same 3 routes every game for every receiver. Like, they needed to get away from that. And I'm hoping that just going with Mannion, who's not, his offense is going to be nothing like what Sirianni, came here with. And bringing Grizzard, and I get that Tampa's offense kind of wasn't good last year, but I mean, Mike Evans missed a lot of time, Bucky Irvin missed a lot of time. Like, they had a bunch of injuries in their offense.
It was all of them. It was all of them. It was Godwin. It was Mbuke. It was Mike Evans. There was so many injuries that caused them to miss time. And there's a lot of people like, ESP for namesake who kind of spoke to, well, look at this 2024 versus 2025, but you have to speak to, there's a significant difference between, there's a lot of injuries here versus injuries there. And, I feel like a guy like Ibuke can be so much like Devontae Smith, so much like Devontae Smith. And I feel like he had so much success and that can be found. And then like a guy like Jalen McMillan, like you can look at McMillan or Evans and Ibuke and look at AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and you can find so many different elements in that offense with those two guys and the type of offense that you can run with those two guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some similarities there, and again, I mentioned it earlier. It seems like they're moving away from Sirianni, like the type of offense that Sirianni has been running.
I hope so.
Something different.
I hope so.
And hopefully a little bit more creative. Brett Eclipse, the hitch route rate early next season will be very telling about who's really controlling the offense between Hurt, Sirianni, and Mannion. Packers were 31st in hitch rate. Yeah, like that will be, and not. Obviously, the understanding fan base that the Philadelphia Eagles are, we have to understand and be, be cool with that. It's not going to look pretty early, probably, because this is should potentially be different than what we've been doing the last 5 years. So don't think, the first game against whoever it's going to be, don't think that the Eagles are going to go out there and throw for 350 yards and put up 40 points. It's not going to happen, most likely. So kind of be prepared that it's going to be like, I was listening
but I feel like that's the thing with Jalen Hurts is you have to accept that you're not going to be a team that throws for 300 passing yards night in and night out. Like I feel like that's the biggest stance, and I feel like that's the biggest circumstance that some fans put into this. It's like, you have to understand that Jalen Hurts plays a specific offense, and you hope that, Sean Mannion and Josh Grizzard play an offense that favors to him. And there's a lot of teams, a lot of this fan base who feels like, they just have this belief that like, you're going to force Jalen Hurts to throw the ball, and that's not necessarily how he is, but hopefully you can find a balance between we wanted him to run the ball more this season. It didn't work. We were struggling to find a way to make it work, but hopefully there's a way that you can find a balance this season.
Adam's exploits. ESP should be covering football overseas, not American football NFL. He's an idiot. I hate him so much. He's like the hiring of Mannion means that Sirianni and Jalen have even more power. No, the reason why we're hiring another offensive coordinator is because Sirianni can't call plays, you moron. Brett Eclipse says, I don't care if there are goofs early on. I just want it to look different than the goofs last year. I do not want to see clear outs and receivers running to a spot and just turning around. I 1000% agree with you. And I do think it'll be different. Jalen or,
yes.
AJ, if hopefully AJ's here, AJ will be, in motion more. Or AJ will be running across the field more. Like I and Devontae, the same thing. So I do agree it will be different. All right. So before we finish up, Connor, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate the hire of Sean Mannion.
Sean Mannion, I mean, it's difficult because, there's a lot of people who are going to sit there and feel like, who are going to try to conflate the idea of, Sean Mannion for some play caller, Brian Johnson, Kevin Petula for some play caller, and the promotions that they have. I'm going to go with a 8.
Wow.
I'm confident. I'm confident in Sean Mannion and what he can become. What about you, LJ?
Before I get to that, there was a comment that I wanted to see if I can find it real quick. Crap. Here we go. And this is from Brett Eclipse. He says, this is a side note, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles draft a quarterback as early as the second round. It's just how the Eagles organization works, and they like play. I do think they are going to draft a quarterback. I don't think it'll be the second round, but I could see them draft a quarterback in the third. They have 2 or 3 third round picks. Like if we would have hired Charlie Weiss Jr., Trinidad Chambliss, I that's why I thought we were going to. That's why I thought.
Oh, for sure.
Chambliss could have been the backup quarterback. You know, if Charlie Weiss Jr. was going to be the head coach, or the offensive coordinator. But it wouldn't surprise me. But the only issue is I don't really like this draft for quarterbacks. Like Fernando Mendoza is going to go number 1, and I don't really think he should be going number 1. But like that's going to be in general,
it's not a very good draft. So it's very difficult. It's going to be one of those years where you see it be so different. People are going to speak a certain mindset about this draft, and they're not going to realize that teams think a certain perspective about this draft.
Yeah, and as Brett Eclipse says, and bottom line, if Mannion stinks, then Sirianni gets fired and we can start fresh. And like, and there were people saying, well, they're not going to fire Sirianni 2 years after winning the Super Bowl. Doug Peterson got fired 2 years after winning 2-3 years, whatever it was, after winning a Super Bowl. So they definitely can, and they definitely will. And like, Jeffrey Lurie is going to only own the team for another 10 years potentially. And his son's going to take over. Like he wants to win more Super Bowls. He's not going to hold on to a coach just because.
Yeah, oh, exactly. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the family that continues to tone this team. So where they go, how they decide to go is going to be very intriguing.
So my rating, I didn't forget. I'm going to give him a 5. I like it's a different direction. It's, nobody expected it. But he's different than Sirianni. We think he's different than Sirianni, like, and where he played and kind of and as a backup quarterback, like he kind of been training himself for this, and he's used to kind of coaching up the quarterback. So I'm hoping that he can get Jalen more comfortable in with the passing game under center, over the middle, and all that. So I'm gonna go 5 for right now. All right. When's free agency? Isn't that in like a month and a half?
We'll be as soon as the Super Bowl's over, we'll do looking at all the free agents and who should stay or who should go, and we'll move on from there. We'll find some good shows.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Obviously follow
and some guests.
Or follow our Twitter page at Kelly Green Hour for any information about when we will be on. Adam's Exploit says 6 out of 10, but the best OCs turned them down or got head coaching jobs. Well, let's be honest. How do we know that? We don't know that if Mannion's going to be a good or bad OC. Honestly, nobody thought Andy was going to be a good head coach.
We also don't know if Mike McDaniel or Brian Daboll are good OCs, where they're going to land. It's very different.
Yeah, we will definitely see. They just have more leeway. I think they kind of have more a longer leash where they're at, and maybe that's why they didn't want to come here. And I just think that McDaniel's more of a hot weather guy. Not he would never survive in the weather. Again, he didn't even want to go to Baltimore. And it's cold there too. So I just think that he's more of a, obviously he was in San Francisco, Miami, now he's in LA, and his wife's from LA. So kind of like, look at all that. Thank you everybody for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour. Sean Mannion is the new offensive coordinator for your Philadelphia Eagles. Please follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour for more information on when our next show will be. You can also follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. And follow me on Twitter at LJHorrell54, and also follow the Eagles Pinpull Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts at Eagles Pinpull Network. For Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you all for tuning in to the Kelly Green